Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles. Let's cover them in a detailed manner so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a couple of important announcements. Unacademy is providing a 25% off on all our subscriptions. I'm told this is a limited period offer, so you can enroll for our classes at a discounted price of 25%. And don't forget to use the code IAS English in order to avail this discounted offer. Now that you roughly have 18 months to go for your 2027 prelims, this would be the right opportunity for you to get started with India's leading educators. The 18-month subscription would give you the right plan, the right schedule, the right opportunity to ensure you prepare accordingly for Prelims 2027. So, do take a look at the prices that are shared here. Those interested can click on the link provided in the video description. And we also have Unacademy Platinum, a special program under which we provide one on one interaction where teachers interact with the students live, where the cameras of the students would also be turned on. And in this structured classroom program, Platinum provides the best experience for students who want hand holding from their educators, who want one on one mentorship from their teachers. So recently, the Platinum batch has started as well. So you can check out the details in the description box below. If you want the PDF of the session, please join our official Telegram channel. After the session ends, the PDF would be shared over here. So let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 8, we have a very important column that examines the recent case involving Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan. Since yesterday, this particular case has grabbed the headlines. Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan has been dismissed from the Indian Army, and this dismissal has been upheld by the Delhi High Court, and now the Supreme Court has refused to intervene, and thus it has provided for the dismissal of the army officer. So we need to understand on what grounds was this officer dismissed from the Indian Army? What did the Delhi High Court say about his dismissal? And why did the Supreme Court refuse to intervene? Because this particular incident raises a crucial question as far as India's constitutional values are concerned, the ethos of the Indian Army is concerned. Now, when you look at the Indian Army and the other armed forces of India, the Navy, the Air Force, our armed forces have always remained strictly professional. Their primary goal and purpose has been national security, unity of the nation, and the forces themselves represent the spirit of inclusivity. The soldiers might be from different religions. The soldiers might be from different castes, different regions of the country, but they're all treated as one fighting unit. The spirit of camaraderie, the morale of the forces is always kept very high, and there is no exclusion within our armed forces on the lines of religion, caste, or region, or the language that you speak. The Indian Army has always managed to stay away from politics, to stay away from unnecessary controversies. The armed forces of India have performed phenomenally well, be it while dealing with external enemies during, let's say, the 1965 war or the 1971 war, for example, or while executing counter insurgency, counter terrorist roles in Jammu and Kashmir as well as in Northeast India. They have displayed the highest level of professionalism. Even while leading the UN peacekeeping forces as part of the UN peacekeeping missions, Indian armed forces, particularly the Indian Army, has always ensured that it displays the spirit of inclusivity. It promotes unity within the force and never distinguishes on the lines of religion, caste, or region or language. Now, in the Indian Army, there is one practice, a tradition. In every regiment, in every unit, there is a mandir or a gurudwara, or could be any other place of worship as well, which is considered as the unit temple. And all the officers of that unit, they have to pay their respects at this unit temple, irrespective of their faith or religion, be it a Muslim officer, a Christian officer, atheist officer, irrespective of their religious belief, their personal religious belief, every member of that particular unit, of that particular regiment, they have to consider this unit mandir or a gurudwara or any other place of worship, which is seen as the unit temple of that army unit. They have to show that respect, enter the premises, and lead the military religious parades. Now, this is not done with a religious connotation. This is not necessarily against the spirit of secularism. No, this is to build cohesion in the unit. It is to promote unity. Because see, please understand, the armed forces, they deal with extraordinary circumstances, not just during wartime, even during peacetime. Even being deployed in the front lines in itself is a very big task, a very challenging task. So it's very crucial for the entire unit to remain as a cohesive unit, to bind them together, to boost their morale, to keep up their confidence levels. Because this is a force where the soldiers should be able to trust each other, where the unit members should be willing to sacrifice themselves to protect and safeguard the others in the unit. So that level of commitment, that cohesion, that unity, that spirit needs to be cultivated. It has to be groomed, it has to be nurtured. So, one way of doing it is by following this practice. It's a religious practice where a unit temple for every regiment, for every unit, is considered as a cohesive strength. And every officer, every jawan, every soldier, they enter the premises, they pay their respects, they even use the slogans when they are fighting, right, in the name of the god. So here the practice is not more about religion or God or spirituality. It's more about keeping the unit together, building that morale together, keeping up the confidence of the unit. So, this is a tradition that is part of the Indian Army. Now, let's look at the case of Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan. What happened in the case of Samuel Kamalesan? As the name of this officer indicates, he is a practicing Christian from the Protestant sect. Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan, as any other professional officer of the Indian Army, was part of the religious practices at the unit Mandir, a unit Gurudwara, which was part of his particular regiment. So he would take off his shoes, enter the sacred Gurudwara with his fellow officers, and he would take part in the ceremonies, the religious parade ceremonies which are held. But Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan had one request from the Indian Army. His request was, on days of worship, as per his personal faith, he didn't want to be part of the religious parades at the Gurudwara because obviously it clashes with his conscience, it clashes with his personal religious belief. He had no hesitation to remove the shoes, to enter the Gurudwara, to lead his officers and be with them, be part of the unit while the tradition is being marked. But his request from the Indian Army was, on days of worship, for example, let's say Good Friday or on Sundays, when the Christian mass is held, on those particular days, he would stand outside the Gurudwara, taking his shoes off, standing in a respectful manner, but he personally didn't want to be a part of the religious tradition, as it would conflict with his personal religious belief. So, this was the request of Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan. And this is where the Indian Army, the military leadership, saw this as an act of disobedience. The Indian Army treated this as an act of insubordination because this is also about following the chain of command. That is very crucial in the armed forces. The junior officers, the subordinates, they should be willing at any given point in time to blindly follow and execute the orders of the commanding officer. It is this discipline, it is this command structure which allows armed forces to function in a seamless and disciplined and professional manner. So Indian Army treated this stance of Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan as an act of disobedience to the chain of command. It was treated as insubordination, and Indian Army decided to dismiss the officer from service. So the matter now had turned into a litigation. The matter reached the doorsteps of the Delhi High Court. Now, first, you need to understand on what grounds can officers be removed in such cases. Article 33 of the Indian Constitution, it provides for the parliament to curb the fundamental rights of certain officers in the country, those who are part of the military, those who are part of intelligence agencies, those who are part of police forces. So, in the interest of national security, unity, and sovereignty of the nation, certain fundamental rights are restricted for personnel of armed forces, police forces, and intelligence agencies. For example, a raw IB officer can't come and claim that he has a right to free speech and expression, and he can't start talking about covert operations of India, right? Because see, Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees right to free speech and expression, it is not an absolute right. It is restricted. There are reasonable restrictions under Clause 2 of Article 19. So, as per Article 33, Parliament can bring out such laws to restrict certain fundamental rights for service personnel, meaning military officers, those serving in intelligence agencies, those who are part of police forces, they don't enjoy all the fundamental rights that an average citizen does, especially the right to free speech and expression. So, on these grounds, the Indian Army had dismissed the officer. The matter reached the Delhi High Court. The Delhi High Court upheld the dismissal. The matter reached the Supreme Court. Supreme Court refused to interfere directly. So essentially, the judiciary was taking the cue from the military generals, from the military leadership regarding the case involving Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan. See, generally, the courts stay away from professional military matters. That's why you have separate military tribunals. Because when it comes to operational decisions, tactical decisions, judges will not have the expertise, the knowledge to take the right calls. That's why certain military matters are not dealt with by your regular judiciary, it is dealt with by the military tribunals. And if at all certain matters reach the doorsteps of the High Court, the Supreme Court, they they do ask for guidance from the leadership of the armed force itself, from the generals. So in the past, we have seen such cases where the courts don't directly play a role quite often, but when the matter reached the Delhi High Court upheld the dismissal, and it fought the argument of the army leadership that this act by Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan was an act of disobedience. This act could have threatened the cohesion of his unit, of his regiment. His refusal to be part of the traditional practice to build cohesion in the unit, to raise the morale of the forces, was seen as an act of insubordination, and it was upheld by the Delhi High Court as well. And Supreme Court upheld the same ruling and refused to interfere further in this matter. Now, if you look at the argument of the Indian Army absolutely has a valid argument that when it comes to such traditions, such rituals, they are very crucial, very critical in a professional force. And as I said, our armed forces have always displayed exemplary professionalism. But however, the writer has an equally valid counterpoint. The writer of the column says, just because courts have upheld the dismissal of this officer, this should not prevent the society from debating this issue further. This should not prevent us from debating on this sensitive matter further. Because this is not just about the ethos of the military, it has implications for the society, it has implications for the military itself. Because what message would this send for minority officers in the armed forces? While the point is accepted that such practices are necessary, to promote cohesion in the unit, to maintain that unity in the unit. Isn't there a possibility where both the viewpoints can coexist simultaneously? Where the army tradition of continuing with the practice of a unit temple, where officers are mandatorily expected to take part in the parades, in the rituals, irrespective of their personal faith. Can't this coexist with personal faith of the officers? That's the question the writer is examining in this article. See, for example, if you have seen the Oscar winning movie Chariots of Fire, which is based on the life of Eric Liddell or Eric Liddell, he was a well known athlete, a Scottish Christian missionary. So, this was in 1920s during the Paris Summer Olympics of 1924, to be precise. Eric Liddell was a conservative Christian, a Christian missionary as well, and an athlete. He refused to take part in the race because the race was being held in the Summer Olympics on a Sunday, when the Sunday Mass is held. He was a British athlete from Scotland. He refused to participate. He said, I'll not run the race because it will interfere with my religious practice. The British Olympic team accommodated this request. Instead of taking disciplinary action against the athlete, the request was accommodated, and Eric Liddell ran a different race on a different day, and yet he won the gold medal. Usually, he was a expert in 100 meters race, but the race was being held on a Sunday. So he skipped the race altogether, which was supported by the British Olympic team, and he instead ran the 400-meter race and he won the gold medal. So this is an example where such practices of personal faith was accommodated with the need for team's unity, team's cohesion, and team spirit. And it was a win-win situation for both, for the unit and for the individual. But of course, you can have a counterpoint here. You can say, sir, this is sports. Whereas the case of Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan is about military. It's about military ethos and military discipline. It's apples and oranges. You can't compare the two. Right? I agree with you. I agree with you. This may not be the most appropriate comparison. Now, let me tell you a related case. The Bijoy Emmanuel case of 1986, where the Supreme Court passed a landmark verdict. Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala, 1986. In Kerala, what happened in a school? Two children from the Christian faith, they refused to sing the national anthem. This was noticed by the school staff, and these children were dismissed from the school because they did not sing the national anthem with the other students. These students had refused to sing the national anthem because, according to their personal belief, it would conflict with their religious practices. So the father of the children approached the court, filed a writ petition, and the Supreme Court heard this case. And Justice Chinnappa Reddy made a landmark observation in this case. He said the children are not guilty. They can't be dismissed from school because of their refusal to sing the national anthem. Why? Because they never disrespected the national anthem. They were standing in a respectful manner with the other students. When the school assembly was taking place, these two students were also standing up, respecting the national anthem, but they were exercising their religious right to not sing the national anthem. And Justice Chinnappa Reddy saw this as a valid practice. When no disrespect was meant for national anthem, when the children were respecting the national anthem but still refusing to sing the national anthem, maybe this is a different viewpoint. But this is where tolerance comes into picture. The judge pointed out, Justice Chinnappa Reddy pointed out in the case, that tolerance has been the primary foundation of the Indian civilization. Tolerance has been our philosophy. Tolerance is what is preached and practiced in our constitution. So there might be people with different viewpoints. Doesn't mean you exclude them. Rather, you create a compromise. You create an opportunity where both can coexist. It need not be the enforcement of majority views all the time. Someone else might have a different viewpoint, and in a tolerant society, you should learn to accommodate those different viewpoints as long as it is legal, as long as it is constitutional, as long as it is not causing any harm to anyone. So, Justice Chinappa Reddy really highlighted the value of tolerance that you find in the Indian civilization, the Indian society, and in the Indian constitution. And he said that these children cannot be dismissed from school. They were not disrespecting the national anthem. They had no intention of doing that. They were simply trying to follow a different viewpoint where they were not singing the national anthem because of their personal religious belief. So the point here is maybe the army leadership, in the case of Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan, could have seen this as a different viewpoint. Officers of different religious faiths and castes would be part of the Indian Armed Forces. So when you're sending out an exclusionary message by dismissing the officer, you might create a vicious environment, especially for those from the minority community, which could internally affect the very spirit of the armed forces, the internal unity and cohesion of the armed forces. The writer says that maybe a compromise could have been found where both views could have coexisted. Because, as I said, Lieutenant Samuel Kamalesan was not disrespecting the Gurudwara. He was not disrespecting the army tradition. He always used to take part in it. Only on days of worship, because it is quite strictly followed in the Protestant faith. Only on those days of worship, he sought an excuse where he would stand outside the Gurudwara without his shoes, with full respect. This was not permitted by the Indian army. So maybe the writer is suggesting that Indian army should have shown some some uh, some leeway, some ground where both viewpoints could have coexisted, and that would have sent a more inclusive message for the armed forces, for the personnel of the armed forces, especially those from other religious faiths and minority communities. And also, if you look at the history of courts' interference in matters of military, it's not that courts have never intervened. In the past, there are many cases where courts have taken up matters related to the armed forces. Take, for example, matters related to pension or with regard to recruitment of women officers, equal opportunities for women officers in combat roles. In these matters, even recruitment, pension, etc., the courts have often interfered in the past. It's not as if the courts have never interfered. So the writer feels that this was a lost opportunity. Maybe the Indian army should have resolved this within the regiment without allowing the matter to escalate. Maybe they could have made an exception for some officers from different faiths who don't want to take part on days of worship, whereas otherwise they're being respectful of the tradition, participating in the tradition on most of the other days. So one small exception could have been made. So different viewpoints could have coexisted, which is the very beauty of the Indian Armed Forces, which have been inclusive of different colors, different race, different regions, different castes and communities. So this case particularly stands out in this regard, and that's why this column is quite important. It helps you explore uncomfortable themes and raise some critical questions. To take up this practice question, as the topic is related to the armed forces, it is related to secularism, it is related to Article 33, related to the role of judiciary in military matters, right? A lot of things to learn from this particular development. So please take up this mains practice question based on what we have discussed. Please practice your answer writing. Now let's move on to the next topic. On page number 8, there's another important article related to the four new labor codes that have come into effect from 21st November 2025. I'm sure you must have already read enough about the labor codes. Shyam Sir has already covered the topic in detail. We have seen the critical viewpoints where we have examined the drawbacks and shortcomings of the new labor codes. But now let's take a look at the optimistic side of the labor codes. This column, written by Harshvardhan Agarwal, who's the president of FICCI. FICCI is an industry association. So the president of FICCI is reviewing the four new labor codes, and he is of the strong opinion that these new labor laws will help transform the labor market in the country. It can transform industrial relations. It can transform labor welfare. It can make it easy for businesses to employ workers. It simplifies dispute resolution. And thus, it is paving the way for India to leverage its demography, take advantage of its working age population, and transform the country into a developed nation, a Viksit Bharat, by 2047. The writer believes that these laws, they have the potential to transform the nation, to transform the economy, and to bring benefits for the workers, for the industries, and for the national economy. So let's dive a little deep into this argument and look at some of the positive aspects of the new labor codes. So in 2019 and 2020, four new laws were enacted by the parliament to simplify and basically to unify all the labor related laws and regulations in the country. The India at one point had multiple laws that dealt with wages, minimum wage, that dealt with occupational safety, that dealt with social security, pension, EPF, that's Provident Fund, gratuity, then the relations between the industry owners and the factory workers. All these aspects related to labor welfare were governed under different set of laws and regulations and rules and guidelines. There was a multiplicity of them. So the second National Labour Commission had recommended the simplification of these laws, to unify them, to get rid of old colonial legislations and come out with modern, forward looking laws that could simplify labor welfare and labor rights. So, based on the suggestion of the Second National Labour Commission, a thorough review of these laws was carried out from 2015 to 2019. The Ministry of Labour and Employment, it held extensive consultation with all the stakeholders, with state governments, with industry associations and industry leaders, with MSME sector, with labor unions and trade unions and workers. So it had an interaction with all the stakeholders and finally came out with these four laws which the parliament enacted. After a lot of criticism and opposition, it has finally come into effect. The government has recently brought these new laws with the corresponding rules into effect from 21st November. So, which are these four laws? The first one is the Code on Wages Act 2019 that deals with minimum wage and the wages for workers. The second one is Industrial Relations Code 2020 that defines labor rights and relations between the workers and the industry. The third one is the Code on Social Security 2020 that deals with social security provisions like insurance, pension, and other benefits, remuneration, etc. Then finally, the OSH code, occupational safety, health, and working conditions at a workplace, ensuring that workers are protected from occupational hazard, ensuring the right and safe working environment is created for the employees, for the laborers, providing for the health and well being of the workers. All these are covered under the OSH code 2020. So these four laws come into effect, and let's see how they can transform the industry. What changes are they bringing? Let's look at some data which can be very important for your mains answer writing as well. See, India has one of the world's largest workforce. India's workforce stands at 643 million workers. India is amongst the few countries with such high working population. We have roughly 643 million workers. Majority of them are in the informal, unorganized sector. Some experts even believe that this number is actually underestimated. That the actual number could be much higher if you account for all the informal sector workers and those who are working in the unorganized industries. So this is a massive number. Now, if you look at India's performance in terms of employment generation, From 2017 to 2023-24, in this period of 6 to 7 years, India has generated 16.83 crore jobs. Close to 17 crores jobs have been generated in the country in a span of 6 to 7 years from 2017 to 2024. Unemployment rate has declined from 6% to 3.2%, with a significant increase in formal employment. This has been one of India's biggest challenge in terms with regard to our economy. How do we bring our workers from the informal industry to the formal industry? How do we drive more formal employment? Because that's when you can provide all the benefits for the employees. You can provide a guarantee with regard to their wages, provide them with social security and better remuneration, better working conditions, because the government can regulate formal employment, whereas informal, unorganized employment, usually it falls outside the bracket of enforcement of these labor laws. So, formalizing the workspace and ensuring that even the informal industry is covered by the laws has been the topmost priority. Given the large working population that we have, given the fact that majority of them are in informal sector, in unorganized sector, it is important to enhance the coverage and enforcement of these laws to protect the workers in the country, to ensure labor welfare. In fact, according to a report from the World Economic Forum, two-thirds of all the new workers who are entering the global workforce, they are coming from India. Since India enjoys the demographic sweet spot, right? Currently, we're enjoying the demographic dividend, which will continue for another couple of decades at least. So, in this period of another 20, 30 years, India will be the biggest contributor in the entire world with regard to new job entrants, the new employees who are entering the workforce. Out of the entire global workforce entering the labor market, two-thirds of these workers will come from India alone. So these laws are very crucial. They come at a crucial time to ensure labor rights and provide for labor welfare while making it easy for industries to run their businesses. Now, if you look at the law on social security, the code on social security, if you look at the code on wages, it is setting universal minimum wages with a national floor wage plan. It is mandating all the companies and industries to provide appointment letters. Usually, in the informal industry and in small enterprises in the MSME sector, many workers who are hired, they were not given employment letters at all. They were not given guaranteed pays. Sometimes the wages would be below the minimum wage that is set. So, to now bring uniformity in this sector, the government is mandating through the law, providing for universal minimum wages, a national floor wage plan, compulsory issuance of appointment letters, and ensuring timely payment of salaries, right? To minimize uncertainty for the workers, right? It has to be a periodic payment as agreed upon in the contract or as promised in the appointment letter. And the working hours, which is also a matter of debate, is being fixed at 48 hours. A 48-hour work week is being reinforced through these codes, which ensures adequate work life balance. Along with that, if you look at the OSH code on occupational safety, health, and working conditions, the new law provides for mandatory health checkups, preventive health checkups organized by the company or the industry, improving the workplace standard, providing better amenities, facilities, providing adequate safety measures in hazardous work environments. Because several industries, they operate in the hazardous environment. They work with hazardous equipment and machinery. So protecting your labor force is important. To prevent injuries and death and to prevent accidents. So the law has adequate provisions in this regard and it prioritizes the safety of the workforce. It tries to protect laborers from occupational health hazards and safety hazards. Then you look at the law on social security. The coverage of employee state insurance is being enhanced. EPF coverage is being streamlined, it's being made simplified. Then a national social security fund is going to be established, and it ensures that social security will now be extended to the informal sector as well, including workers in the gig platform economy. Today, lakhs of workers in India are working on gig platforms, app based delivery platforms, be it your cab hailing services or food delivery apps, e commerce apps, and the many other platform based applications. India currently has around 1 crore workers in the gig industry. Now, this is expected to more than double to more than 2 crores in another 5 years. By 2030, 2031, India's gig platform workforce is expected to more than double. And right now, they are the most vulnerable because workers in the gig economy right now they don't have adequate social security, they don't have guarantees, right? They're often treated as contractual employees with very minimal wages and minimal protection, and often reports of abuse of gig workers also come up. So to protect them, state governments are bringing out their own laws, but now having a central law that considers gig workers as part of the formal sector is extremely crucial. So there are such positive uh, provisions present in the new labor laws. Then talking about women, the participation of women in the labor force. The female labor force participation rate is one of the lowest in the world, just around 32.8%, according to the International Labor Organization. The ILO, which brought out the India Employment Report 2024. According to the India Employment Report of International Labor Organization, female labor force participation rate is just at 32.8%, which is much lower compared to other countries which are at the same level as that of India. So increasing the participation of women in the workforce is a priority. And the new laws, they try to push towards greater participation of women. It mandates industries to provide adequate facilities for women, providing maternity benefits, ensuring equal remuneration for equal work, then providing crash facilities so that mothers can take care of their children while fulfilling their familial obligation. They will fulfill their career objectives as well without disrupting their careers. Mother should not be a disruption for the career of women workers. So ensuring this is the responsibility of the workplace. It's a responsibility of the company, the organization which is employing the women workers. So these provisions are being more streamlined in order to encourage greater participation of women in the labor force. And if women choose to work in the night shift, right? Because in some states it had been banned on safety grounds, but now the OSH code allows women to opt for night shifts if the company takes care of the security provisions. This empowers women and encourages them to participate even after motherhood. And these laws are indeed forward looking, according to the writer. It also simplifies the registration process for the companies, right? It also simplifies the entire paperwork when new workers are hired, when their salaries are being processed, when their social security is being set up. Companies have to handle a lot of paperwork on the back end. Sometimes it results in disputes between the organization and the employee. So now this is all being streamlined through the deployment of technology, AI algorithms, and single registration, single dispute resolution platforms are being created, which will help in quicker and easier dispute settlement. It will significantly reduce the cost. It will reduce the cost of operations for the industry. It will simplify the operations for the industry. It will also simplify dispute resolution. So thus, the new four labor codes, it has something for the industry as well. It has something for the workforce as well. The writer strongly believes that these laws can prepare India's workforce to meet with the challenges of the future and drive the Indian economy towards becoming a Viksit Bharat. So, based on this argument of the writer, let's take up this practice question. The four labor codes will result in a modern labor regulatory system that supports the growing dynamism of the Indian economy. Examine. So let's see if you can use the discussion, the points that we have brought up, the statistics that I've provided, and please try to build that into an answer. Now let's move on to the next topic, the third article for today from Indian economy. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has given grade C rating for India's national account statistics. So national account statistics such as India's GDP methodology, how India estimates its gross domestic product, how India computes its GVA, gross value added. These national account statistics, they have been graded as C by the IMF. The IMF provides grading for national accounting. It evaluates the accounting practices, the methodology which is used, the accuracy of these estimates, whether it helps in surveillance of the economy, whether it helps in monitoring the economic situation accurately. This is gauged by the IMF through this survey, and it provides a grading. So, the National Account Statistics of India, our GDP methodology, GVA methodology, has been given grade C rating. This is the second worst rating possible. The grades given are A, B, C, and D. These are the four grades given out by the IMF. So, for India's national account statistics for GDP and GVA estimation, the grade India has received is grade C. But overall, to take all the accounting into consideration, the overall grade for Indian accounting and methodology is grade B. Now, this highlights that there are shortcomings in India's accounting and India's estimation. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, which is the nodal ministry for national accounting and national statistics, it comes out with these measurements of GDP, GVA, and many others. Some help in forecasting the economy, it helps in understanding the current status or the performance of the economy. It will help in raising some red flags about concerns coming up in the economy. It helps in policy interventions, right? Even RBI looks at these vital statistic indicators to plan its monetary policy, right? The way in which inflation is measured. In India, the wholesale methodology which is used capture CPI inflation, right? These are vital statistics for gauging the health of our economy. But the performance of these indicators, the methodology is very poor as per the IMF. IMF has found some serious shortcomings. Now, for example, if you look at GDP estimation in India, the methodology used is income based and expenditure based method. We don't use production price based method, which is seen as a global standard. Because in India, we don't have an accurate index to capture production prices. So the ministry uses income and expenditure based methodology, which is seen as a flawed methodology by economic experts. And also, the base year is outdated. I'm sure all of you know the base year for most of the accounting in India is 2011 2012. And this does not provide you the accurate picture of the current economic situation. Then, if you look at India's inflation measurement, though it has received grade B rating by IMF, the base year is outdated for CPI. CPI that consists of a basket of goods, which is well distributed. The problem is the base year is outdated to 2011 2012. So now the ministry is actually working on new indices, which might be launched next year by mid 2026. There is a lot of anticipation that Ministry of Statistics program implementation will implement the new methodology of inflation estimation through CPI. It will bring out new GDP methodology as well with a new base year. So this might help India to basically match the global standards when it comes to national accounting. So overall, India has received grade B, but for national accounting such as GDP, GVA, we have received grade C, which means there is a lot of scope for improvement. And the current statistics being brought out by the government, it may not be the accurate picture because of the shortcomings present in the methodology itself. Next, the Supreme Court has asked the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting to take measures to regulate social media and internet based platforms to prevent harmful content from being posted. As we all know, internet based platforms, social media platforms, they can be easily misused to spread misinformation, to spread fake news, to carry out propaganda, to tarnish someone's image, to harm someone's reputation. Currently, we already have a set of laws and regulations in this regard. We have the IT Act that deals with any offenses which are carried out through the usage of such technology. We also have the IT rules that have been recently notified, IT rules 2021, which has been amended in 2023. They bring some regulations on social media intermediaries. Right now, the social media intermediaries, they have an obligation on them, a legal duty to work with law enforcement and police and to take down harmful and objectionable content. It could be adult content which is going viral, or it could be content which is harming national security, or content which is disturbing public order, which could be triggering riots, or content which is tarnishing someone. So such content can be taken down, and there are provisions in that regard today. But however, the court is pointing out that if you're allowing users to create harmful content and post them, then by the time it is actually taken down, by the time the police act, by the time the social media company takes down the content, at least 24 to 36 hours would have passed. By then, the image of that person would have already taken a hit. Now, take for example how women are often subjected to trolling and abuse on social media platforms. There have been horrific incidents of rape videos going viral, gang rape videos being circulated, or morphed images with pornographic content being circulated. Now, if these visuals and images, if they remain online, even for 10 hours, even for 20 hours, don't you think by then the image of that person is already damaged? Don't you think it leads to their emotional abuse? It affects the rights of these individuals who are getting abused on a daily basis online. The Supreme Court of India is directing the government to come out with a new method to prevent such content from being posted. Right now, we have a way to take down such content, to punish the perpetrators. The IT rules of 2021 provides for that regulation where social media companies have a strict deadline. They have to comply with the orders of the law enforcement and police. Let's say in matters of rape and sexual abuse, they have to block such content within 24 hours, and they have to cooperate with the investigating agencies to trace the origin of the content, who is the creator of the content, so that legal action can be taken against them. But now the Supreme Court is venturing into a different domain. It wants such content to be prevented from posting. But this again can be problematic. This could lead to censorship. There's already a lot of concern and criticism about the IT rules being too excessive because it already gives tremendous powers to police and law enforcement and the government to block certain content. Social media intermediaries have no other option. Once they receive a request, they have to take down the content. But if you bring in preemptive censorship of sorts, this could end up hurting free speech and expression. That is always the concern. But however, the Supreme Court has clarified that its intention is not to affect free speech. Its intention is not to hurt the right to free speech and expression under Article 90. But again, as I said, right to free speech and expression is not absolute. It can be restricted on reasonable grounds. Supreme Court has reminded that right to free speech can be restricted. But here the intention is not to curb free speech, but the intention is to protect the rights of the victims who get abused on online platforms and prevent harmful content from being posted. So the judiciary has a point, the Supreme Court has a valid point here. Now, let's say someone is trying to circulate a morphed pornographic image of an individual. Why should such content even be allowed to be posted? Let's say a rape video is being pushed on platforms and it is going viral. Why should this happen in the first place? Instead of reacting to it and then taking down the post, shouldn't these social media companies have a methodology in place to prevent such content from being posted? But yes, the concern also is equally valid because such options could empower the government even further. It could use the tool as a pre censorship tool and it can block content from being posted on platforms which is critical of the government, which is um, expressing dissent against the current dispensation. That is where a real concern, a real problem lies. The Supreme Court has asked the government to examine this matter to come out with a regulatory model. It is suggesting a independent regulator. It is suggesting an ombudsman of sorts, a regulator who is completely autonomous, who's not obliged to the government, who's not obliged to the judiciary, who's not obliged to the social media companies, an independent authority who can look into the prevention of posting objectionable content on social media platforms and online platforms. That's a recommendation from the Supreme Court. So let's see if the government acts upon this. Of course, the government would be pushed to take up the matter, but will an independent regulator be set up? That is the question. And how will the balance be achieved between protecting the victims and protecting right to free speech and expression? So that is the point we need to watch out for. Next, a big development from Assam. The Assam cabinet has approved the report of a panel of group of ministers granting scheduled tribe status to six indigenous communities. The Assam, as you know, is a demographically complex state. It's a multi-ethnic a state dominated by tribal indigenous communities. Several communities already have the scheduled tribe status, which accords them with certain protection and privileges. And now the government has decided to act on the report of a GOM, a group of ministers, which has recommended ST status for six communities. And the cabinet has approved the proposal. So now the government might bring this into effect very soon by tabling an appropriate bill in the assembly. But this move has raised strong opposition by other indigenous tribes who already have the ST status. So currently, the communities which are being granted the ST status include the Koch Rajbanshis, Matak Moran, Chutia, Tai Ahom, the tea tribes, the plantation workers. So in total, these six communities are now being provided with the scheduled tribe status. If this is brought into effect, the argument of other tribal communities is that it affects their rights, it affects the privileges already granted to them. Because if you're granting ST status to every other community, it will undermine the rights which are already extended to the really backward tribal communities, the indigenous forest dwelling tribes. In fact, this matter has been very, very sensitive in Assam from a long time. The demand for ST status across Northeast India. We have seen what has happened in Manipur, the demand for ST status by the Metis, how it has triggered violent clashes between the Metis and Kukis. Same with Assam. In Assam, communities like the Bodos, they have fought an insurgent war on these grounds. Recently, the Bodo insurgency was brought to an end through the Bodo Peace Accord, the third Bodo Peace Accord, where the Bodo community has been granted with ST status through the peace process that has gone on for the last 3 decades. And Bodo insurgency was finally brought to an end. So now the All Bodo Students Union is opposing this move. They feel that their rights would be undermined if other communities are also given ST. So this is a matter which has led to violence in the state. It has triggered riots in the past. It has even triggered insurgencies in the past. So the decision of the Assam government to go ahead with the proposal, and if at all they bring this into effect, it could have consequences on the demography of Assam and even the public order situation in Assam. Because there is strong opposition against extending ST status to the other communities. But the panel which examined the issue genuinely feels that communities like Koch Rajbanshis, the Tea tribes, the Tai Ahom, they do deserve the protection of the scheduled tribe status. So it's again a highly debatable topic, controversial as far as Assam and its internal politics are concerned. So it's still a developing story. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's quickly wrap up the discussion for today by looking at the smaller articles, the prelims related articles in the paper. On page 14, there's a report on India's ties with Indonesia, the defense relations to be precise. Indonesia is a key partner, a security partner for India in the Indian Ocean region and in Southeast Asia region. So Indonesia gets highest priority from India under the Look East, Act East policy and also under the Indo-Pacific Doctrine. It's one of the key members of the ASEAN group. And India, Indonesia even have a comprehensive strategic partnership that has been established between them. In fact, this year, during the Republic Day celebrations, it was the Indonesian president who had been invited as the guest of honor. India gives this treatment to the countries which are most important for our foreign policy, for our interests. So the leaders who are invited to be the chief guests of the Republic Day parade, for them, we are sending a symbolic message that for this year, your country would be the topmost priority in our foreign policy. So in this year's Republic Day parade, it was Indonesia's president who was invited. In fact, a contingent of the Indonesian armed forces took part in the Republic Day parade, highlighting the close military ties between the two armed forces. We even have several joint defense exercises, military exercises that we take part in. So now, following the meeting of the defense ministers, both countries have agreed to take the relationship to the next level. Indonesia is considering the procurement of the Brahmos cruise missile to strengthen its deterrence capabilities in the South China Sea region. The first country to buy Brahmos from India is the Philippines. After Philippines, Indonesia is considered to be the next probable buyer of the Brahmos. Because these Southeast Asian countries, they face a direct threat from China's aggression in the South China Sea. China has been extremely aggressive with regard to the maritime and territorial disputes. In fact, China and Indonesia are part of a major dispute which belongs to the Spratly group of islands. So can you tell me which specific island is the point of contestation between China and Indonesia in the Spratly group? There is one island which is in the news where Chinese Coast Guard and Navy have been super aggressive. They've even targeted Indonesian fishing boats. They have sunk Indonesian vessels at this particular island, which is part of the Spratly group. It actually belongs to Indonesia, according to the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. But China disputes the claim and it displays military aggression. So Indonesia is looking to strengthen its deterrence and it is in advanced stage to procure the Brahmos from India. So according to this update, following the meeting between the two defense ministers, both countries have made significant progress towards finalizing the Brahmos deal. So maybe in few more months, the deal might be finalized and Indonesia might become the second country in the same region to procure the Brahmos from India. Is that clear? Please note down these points. Plus, we are also part of important forums and platforms like ADMM Plus, ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, where the maritime security issues of Indian Ocean region, Indo-Pacific region are discussed. We are also part of IORA grouping, Indian Ocean Rim Association, which is led by India. Currently, India is the chair of the IORA grouping. Indonesia is a key member. So these are platforms where the two countries actually collaborate. India's Indo-Pacific vision, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, it perfectly aligns with the ASEAN outlook for Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative was announced by Prime Minister Modi in 2018 during the East Asia Summit. It's bringing like-minded democracies together in the Indo-Pacific region to stabilize the Indo-Pacific and enforce rules-based order to ensure all the countries respect international law. So ASEAN has the same vision. The ASEAN grouping, it has an outlook for Indo-Pacific which aligns with the free and open Indo-Pacific vision of India. So that's why India-Indonesia defense relations can be very important. So this article helps you get an insight into these defense ties. Next, the government is launching a new scheme to help the textile industry. The scheme is called Tex-RAMPS. Very factual topic, can be relevant for your prelims. It stands for Textile Focused Research, Assessment, Monitoring and Startup Scheme. The government is providing 305 crores for this particular scheme, which is implemented from 2025 to 2031. These funds would be exclusively used for incentivizing and funding research and innovation in the field of textile manufacturing. So this will help in development of new technology. It will help in generating new IP, new intellectual property, which can boost India's textile industry. By the way, India is a major textile manufacturer and it's one of our key exports. So to promote research, innovation, and capacity development in textile industry, the Tex-RAMPS scheme is being launched by the government with an outlay of 305 crores, and it will be implemented from 2025 till 2031. So please note what's the expansion of the scheme. It stands for Textiles Focused Research Assessment Monitoring and Startup Scheme. It even provides seed funding for startups in the field of textile research. Coming to the next article, article number 8. Japan has been picking issues with China in the last few weeks, ever since it got a new prime minister. The new prime minister, Sane Takaichi, who's a right wing leader from the right wing of the political ideology, since she rose to the prime minister's position, Japan has been taking a more militaristic, aggressive approach towards China and issues that are present in this region. Recently, we've discussed how Japan has made statements about defending Taiwan, protecting Taiwan, because China sees Taiwan as part of its sovereignty. China has a eventual plan to occupy, annex, and integrate Taiwan into its territorial sovereignty. China opposes any foreign intervention here, and Japan has recently extended support. Now, Japan has even deployed a medium range missile unit at the Yonaguni island that you can see here in the map. Please note the location of this island. It's barely 100 kilometers from Taiwan. It's a Japanese island located in East China Sea. And Japan has recently deployed a medium range missile unit over here. And Japan has said the intention is to defend Taiwan in case of a Chinese invasion on Taiwan. So China has responded to this aggressively as well. And it's the same region where China Japan have a standing maritime dispute over the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands. So Yonaguni is a Japanese island. Remember the location, it's 100 kilometers off the coast of Taiwan, and it's a Japanese island where a new missile unit has been deployed by Japan to counter Chinese aggression. Coming to the last article on the supplementary page, it's not 16, the page number 2 of the Science and Tech supplement. There's an article which is relevant for science and technology, which is relevant for health. This article refers to a color additive, which is often used in food. It's called Auramine O. It's actually an industrial dye, an industrial coloring agent, a very bright yellow coloring agent used for various industrial applications. Across multiple industries, Auramine O is used. It's a very bright yellow colored dyeing agent used in many industries. But however, it's not a food grade color. It is used in leather, it is used in textiles, it's used in various other industries, but it is not for human consumption. It's not safe for human consumption. In fact, research shows that ingestion of Auramine O can be highly toxic. But because of its easy and cheap availability, it is often used by food vendors and certain industries in the food sector. It is known to cause damage to liver, kidney. It is known to cause a spleen enlargement. It is also a known carcinogen, which can cause cancers in humans. So it's a banned color additive. It's not a safe food grade color. It's not fit for human consumption, but yet it is widely used in various food products by sweet manufacturers, street vendors, the some of the hotels and restaurants and food industries which are not properly regulated. Its usage is banned under the Food Safety Standards Act of 2006. The FSSAI is struggling to enforce the ban. The Food Safety Standards Authority of India is trying to ensure Auramine O is not used in food products, but there is a lack of enforcement. And as a result, Auramine O is entering the food supply chain, and we are consuming this deadly food dye through various food which is adulterated, which is chemically adulterated. So please remember this adulteration agent, Auramine O, a industrial grade chemical dye which is being used for food products. On this note, I bring my analysis to an end. I hope the topic is clearly understood. I hope the analysis was insightful. And if you benefited from the session, do support us with your likes and comments. That is it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.